I was 64 years old when this happened, and I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I am not an excitable man. I spent 22 years as a machinist and another decade as a school bus driver. I have seen a man lose 3 fingers and not cry. I drove kids with behavioral issues through sleet storms on mountain roads and never once lost my composure. By the time I took the toll booth job on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I had already lived enough life to know that the world is usually boring and occasionally terrible, and that those are both manageable conditions. I took the night shift because the differential pay was better, and because my wife had passed 2 years prior, and the house was very quiet in a way that sleep didn't solve. Working 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at least gave the silence a frame. I arrived at the same time every night, set my thermos of black coffee on the warm wooden counter, positioned my logbook to the left of the terminal, and settled into a chair that had long since surrendered its cushion to time. The booth itself was a relic from a different era-kept green paint, a fluorescent tube that buzzed faintly at all hours, a sign on the exterior that still claimed the toll was 25 cents. Management kept saying they'd update the signage. They never did. It was a boring job. At my age, boring was exactly what I wanted. Most nights, the lane was quiet between 1 o'clock and 4 a.m., the occasional long-haul trucker. A nurse coming off. A double. Once, a woman in a ball gown who paid an exact change without making eye contact and drove off into the dark like something from a fever dream. But mostly it was quiet. Mostly I read paperback westerns and refilled my thermos and listened to the low country music station that barely came in through my handheld radio. The first hint that things were off happened around 2 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October. Sedan drifted into my lane with its headlights completely blacked out. I didn't even hear the engine until it was right on top of me. The fog was that thick that night, hanging low and wet like a curtain that went all the way to the ground. The car just materialized out of it, slow and silent, like something being exhaled. For a half second, my brain told me I was imagining it. Then the vehicle stopped at the barrier, and the fog swirled around it, and I could see that it was real. A dark blue, or maybe black 4-door, older model with no plates visible. From where I sat, I figured it was just some reckless kid being an idiot. It happens more than you'd think. Teenagers driving dark as a dare, or people so tired they forget their lights entirely. I leaned out the window, already composing the measured lecture I was going to deliver, that the driver didn't look at me. He was staring straight ahead through the windshield at something I couldn't see. His hands gripped so tight on the steering wheel that even in the dim light, his knuckles looked like white stones pressed against leather. There were 4 of them in the car, all young, all sitting perfectly still, all facing forward in that synchronized, unnatural way that a group of people only sits when they've been told to, or when something has frightened them into compliance. No music, no talking, just the low mechanical hum of the heater and the distant sound of a truck somewhere on the highway behind them. "That'll be $2, son," I said. My voice sounded thinner in the damp air than I intended. The driver didn't respond. He didn't move. He held that position for what felt like 20 seconds, but was probably closer to 5, just long enough to make the back of my neck prickle. Then slowly he turned his head. The movement was deliberate and smooth, like something on a mechanical pivot. He looked at me. He didn't blink. His face in the booth light was unremarkable young, male, no particular expression, but his eyes were fixed on mine with an intensity that was wholly disproportionate to the situation. "Are you kidding me?" he said. His voice was flat, drained, of inflection. "Every day it's more expensive." It was such a normal complaint delivered in such an abnormal way that for a moment I genuinely didn't know how to respond. "I just work here," I replied, keeping my eyes on his hands the way. My old foreman used to tell us to watch a faulty press because the hands are where the trouble starts. He reached into his front pocket and produced a $5 bill, folded. Once, he held it out between two fingers. When I reached through the window to take it, his fingers closed briefly around mine, not in a grip, just a contact, and his skin felt like cold, wet leather. Not cold like someone who's been outside in October. Cold like something that hadn't been worn for a long time. I pulled back instinctively, and the bill came with me. I dropped the $3 change into the collection tray. "What a ripoff," he muttered. The words were slow, almost rehearsed. And speaking of ripoffs, he lunged. One hand shot through the window and clamped around my wrist like a vice. Not a grab, a clamp, mechanical and certain. I felt a cold metal ring snap shut in the same motion. A handcuff, one half, locking around my wrist before I had processed what was happening. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my jaw. I yanked backward with everything I had, but he had leverage, and I was halfway out the window, and the cuff was locked. He shifted the car into gear with his other hand. The engine, which had been nearly silent, suddenly roared deeper and louder than it had any right to be for the size of the vehicle. The tires shrieked against the wet asphalt. I saw, in that fraction of a second before full terror erased clear thinking, a length of nylon rope trailing from the open cuff end, snaking back through the window into the dark interior of the car. I understood immediately what I thought was about to happen. I was going to be yanked through the window frame. My shoulder would dislocate, or my arm would simply come apart at the joint, and I would be dragged down the Pennsylvania Turnpike at 80 miles an hour in the October dark. The car surged forward. The rope went taut. I closed my eyes. I heard myself make a sound I hadn't made since I was a child, raw and involuntary and animal. Then, silence. I opened my eyes. The sedan was already a receding smear of red taillights, dissolving into the fog, maybe 200 yards out and moving fast. The other end of the rope lay on the wet ground just outside my booth. It hadn't been tied to anything inside the car. It was just a length of cord 10 feet, maybe 12, with one end attached to the cuff and the other end attached to nothing at all. They hadn't wanted to kill me. They had wanted to see the look on my face. I sat on the floor of that booth for 20 minutes. My hand wouldn't stop shaking. I used the heavy-duty wire cutters I kept in the maintenance drawer to get the cuff off. It took a while. My hands weren't cooperating. I filed a police report that night, and 2 officers came out and took photographs of the cuff and the rope. They were professional and took down everything I said and told me they'd circulate the description. There are no cameras on that stretch of road. There never have been. They never found the sedan. But here's the thing I have not been able to explain in the years since, and I have tried. When I finally picked up that $5 bill to put it in the register, it wasn't a $5 bill. It wasn't any kind of currency. It was a funeral fan, the flat cardboard kind they hand out at summer services to keep the congregation cool. On one side was a pastoral illustration of a meadow. On the other side was a photograph of a man in a dark suit, hands folded, lying. In an open casket, the man in the photograph looked exactly like me. I quit the next morning. I told my supervisor I was having health issues, which was true in the sense that I believed continuing would be hazardous to my health. I don't drive on highways after dark anymore. I keep to the surface streets where the lights are close together, and the world feels like it has edges. Some people think I'm being irrational. I think those people have never had their own face handed to them in a coffin at 2 a.m. on an empty road. I want to be straightforward with you. I love night shifts. I always have. There's a specific quality to the silence between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. that I genuinely find peaceful, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of the world having momentarily agreed to leave you alone. Most people experience that for maybe 30 minutes on a Sunday morning. I get it for 6 hours, 4 nights a week. Or I did at the time. I was a supervisor at a major toll plaza in upstate New York. My job was less about processing cars and more about managing the attendants, handling cash discrepancies, and filing the end-of-shift reports. I spent most of my time in what we called the cash room, a small, locked, climate-controlled office at the back of the main booth building, where we counted the night's collections and stored the starting banks for the incoming shift. It had one window, tinted, that looked out at the side parking area and a portion of the travel lanes. It was private and secure, and I loved it. I was training for a half marathon that fall, so I'd usually use my 2 20-minute breaks to stretch in the empty hallway or do some light movement to keep my legs loose. On the night in question, a Thursday, in early November, around 3 a.m., the peace evaporated all at once, the way it sometimes does. Not gradually, just gone. It started as something I almost didn't register. A car moved through the lane nearest the building, paid the attendant, and then, instead of accelerating away, continued at a crawl, maybe 5 miles an hour, past the line of booths and along the building's exterior wall. Through my tinted window, I could see the car's headlights sweeping past. Then they stopped. The car stopped. The driver's window was level with mine. From where I sat, I could see a silhouette in the driver's seat, and in the silhouette, I could see his face with enough resolution to know that he was looking directly at my window. I know the glass was tinted. I know he could not have seen me, sitting at the desk 6 feet back in a dimly lit room. But the certainty of his gaze was such that the rational explanation felt insufficient. He was looking at my window, the way you look at someone when you already know they're there. And then he smiled. It was the widest smile I have ever seen on a human face, wide enough that my first thought, before conscious evaluation intervened, was that something was wrong with his jaw. His teeth were very white and caught the parking lot's sodium lamp, light in a way that made them seem to emit their own brightness. The smile didn't shift or soften. He held it for a full 60 seconds, I know, because I watched the second hand on the clock above my desk, and then the car accelerated smoothly away. I sat with that for a moment. We get eccentric drivers at every hour. I cataloged it and moved. An hour later, I heard it from the side door, the heavy metal fire door on the north side of the building that the attendants used for smoke breaks. Click, click, click. Someone was testing the handle. The door locks from the inside with a deadbolt and a secondary security bar. And it is a very substantial door, not something that yields to casual pressure. But whoever was on the other side wasn't applying pressure. They were just working the handle methodically and without urgency, the way a person tests a door when they want to know if it's locked rather than when they want to open it. I stood up. My heart was already moving faster than I liked. I checked the intercom to the active booths. My attendant on duty said she had not seen anyone walk toward the building from the travel lanes. The parking lot camera monitor on my desk showed an empty lot. I told myself it was wind or thermal expansion or some mechanical artifact of the building settling. I sat back down and opened my book. The computer monitor was the primary light source in the room. After 10 minutes of my not touching the mouse, the screensaver activated and the room went substantially darker. I reached for the mouse. I looked up first, the way you sometimes do for no reason, some instinct that precedes thought. There was a figure standing in the parking lot, 10 feet from my window. He was very tall. He was not moving. His face was oriented toward the glass at the same angle and with the same quality of directed attention as the driver had used an hour before, except now there was no car between us and no reasonable explanation for how he had crossed the lot without triggering any of the motion-activated lights along the perimeter fence. The smile was the same, identical, the same impossible width, the same luminous teeth. I was looking at the same face. My hands went flat against the desk. I could not make them move. The rational part of my brain was still trying to generate explanations, trick of light, fatigue, a reflective surface, but the animal part of my brain, the part that doesn't speak in words, was simply screaming. He took one step forward. His hand came up from his side and pressed flat against the glass palm out, fingers spread, the way a child presses against a pet store window. I heard the glass creak very faintly under the pressure. Then he began to slide his hand downward across the pane, slowly, completely controlled. The sound it made was wet and deliberate, a long descending squeak that went on for what felt like 20 seconds. He wasn't applying enough pressure to break the glass. He wasn't trying to. He was marking the spot. He was leaving something of himself on the surface. I knocked my chair over, going backward. I hit the floor and scrambled to my feet and kept the desk between myself and the window. I grabbed the phone and called security. 2 officers did a full sweep of the exterior perimeter within 4 minutes. They found nothing. No footprints in the damp grass along the fence line. No tire tracks beyond those already documented from the earlier car. No physical evidence of any person having stood in the location I described. When the sun came up, I went outside. I needed to see the window from the outside to verify to myself that the tint would have prevented him from seeing me, and that what I'd experienced was therefore an elaborate coincidence rather than something targeted. There was a handprint on the glass in the condensation. It was at the right height. The palm was roughly human-sized, but the fingers were not. Each finger was approximately 8 inches long. And where a human hand has 3 knuckles per finger, each of these had 4. I photographed it before the morning sun burned the condensation off. I have that photograph. I've shown it to 12 people. 8 of them say it's a smear or a trick of the light. 4 of them don't say anything at all for a long moment, and then they change the subject. The facility manager told me it was a chemical reaction from the industrial glass coating. He said that sleep deprivation causes perceptual distortion. He said these things in the careful tone of someone who very much needs a particular thing to be true. I still work nights. I always will. I wasn't lying when I said I love them. But I don't sit behind glass anymore. I need to see what's coming from every angle. I need to know that whatever is outside is staying there. I want to establish something up front. I am a rational man. I have a background in mechanical engineering. I spent 15 years with the Department of Transportation doing maintenance assessments, and I transitioned to booth operation because the hours suited my life, and I genuinely don't mind solitude. In 15 years of infrastructure work, I have diagnosed and explained every manner of strange sound and failed component and aberrant system behavior. I know that code 9 on the terminal is just a hydraulic seal leak. I know that radio static at certain hours is just atmospheric interference bouncing off the ionosphere. I know that pipes contract in the cold and produce sounds that, at 3 a.m., can make you feel like something is walking in the walls. Highway 19 is different. It is a 50-mile stretch of 2-lane road through uninhabited second-growth forest in the northeastern part of this state, and when the sun goes down, the place develops a quality that I've struggled to name. The best I can offer is this: it feels like a location that has been forgotten by something that was previously paying attention to it. And forgotten by something that was paying attention is not the same as simply empty. I was assigned to booth 4, which sat at the midpoint of the highway at a four-way junction that saw perhaps 30 cars on a busy weeknight. I arrived for my shift at precisely 8 minutes early, as I always do, counted the starting bank, verified the safe seal, logged into the terminal, made note of the ambient temperature, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, clear and settled in. At 3:33 a.m., the digital clock on my terminal froze. It did not glitch or roll or display an error code. It simply stopped the red digits holding their position, with complete stability, as though time itself had decided to pause and think things over. I've dealt with terminal malfunctions before. I made a note in my logbook and reached for the reset sequence. It was at that moment that I noticed the woods had gone silent. Highway 19 in October is never silent. The forest is full of sound insects. At the lower registers, owls, the perpetual movement of small animals in the underbrush. The ambient noise of a living forest at night is something you stop consciously hearing after the first week, the way you stop hearing HVAC hum in an office. But when it stops, you notice immediately. Something in the nervous system registers the subtraction before the conscious mind does. It had all stopped, every single sound. The forest was as quiet as a recording studio. I picked up my tactical flashlight. I carry a quality 1,200 lumens. Because the area around the booth is completely unlit once you step past the lane fixtures and stepped outside to check the breaker panel on the north side of the building. I kept the light aimed low and to the right of my feet, as I always do, to preserve as much of my peripheral vision as possible. It was this habit that caused me to see them. 3 feet from my door, arranged in a perfectly straight line running, perpendicular to the building's face, were 33 pennies. They were spaced with precise geometric regularity. I would later estimate they were placed to within a millimeter of equal spacing along the line's length. Every single one was heads up, perfectly, uniformly heads up. The copper shone in my flashlight beam with a clarity that immediately registered as wrong. Everything else on the ground, the asphalt, the painted lane markers, the concrete barrier curb was dark with dew. The coins were bone dry, and from them rose a faint shimmering distortion in the air, the way air shimmers above hot asphalt in summer. A heat signature, from pennies, on a 38-degree night. I crouched down to touch one and stopped myself. I don't know why I stopped myself. Instinct. The same instinct that tells you not to reach into a hole you can't see the bottom of. I straightened up and turned my flashlight toward the toll lane. There was an office chair in the middle of the road, 20 feet from the booth entrance. As far as I could tell in the flashlight beam, to the chair sitting inside the booth. Behind me. It was positioned facing me. Not facing the direction of traffic. Facing me. I am a rational man. I stood there for approximately 10 seconds and tried to construct an explanation that held together. I could not do it. I went back inside. I engaged the deadbolt. I engaged the security bar. I sat down in my chair, the one I had been sitting in all night, still there, unmoved, and I opened my logbook and wrote down the time and a factual description of what I'd seen. My handwriting was not as steady as I would have liked. Then the intercom buzzed. The intercom is a one-way communication system. Drivers press a button at the lane entrance to request assistance when the automated system fails. It's connected to an exterior speaker and fed to a small monitor on the desk that shows the lane camera image. I looked at the monitor. The camera showed the empty lane, the fog thickening against the lens. The motion sensor light triggered meaning. Something had tripped it, but nothing visible in the frame. A voice came through the intercom. I want to be precise about this. It was not a person's voice. It was a composite of mechanical sounds, assembled in the pitch and rhythm of speech, the metallic grind of the toll gate opening, the triple beep of a card reader completing a transaction, a noise like paper being fed through a receipt printer. These sounds, occurring in rapid sequence and at varying pitches, produced something that had the cadence of words without the substance of them. "Welcome to Highway 19, it said, or something that resolved into those sounds if your brain was trying hard enough to find language. Then it began to repeat, speeding up each iteration. The sounds grew more compressed, more distorted, each loop shorter and faster than the last, until what had sounded like words sounded like something screaming through the teeth of a gear. It filled the booth. I reached for the volume knob and found it fused, not mechanically stuck, but fused, as though the metal of the knob had partially merged with the housing of the unit. It would not turn even a fraction of a degree. I looked at my logbook. I focused on the logbook. I wrote the ambient temperature again, and then crossed it out and wrote the time. I could feel the sound on my back teeth. Then a hand pressed against the glass. I saw it in my peripheral vision and did not look directly at it. I am telling you as plainly as I can. I would not look at it. I described it in my logbook from my peripheral vision only. 2 long fingers. Too many joints. The skin a color that I wrote down as drowned, a deep purplish blue-gray, like a bruise the size of a hand. It did not knock or scratch or attempt to apply pressure. It simply rested there. A frost that had accumulated on the exterior of the glass melted in a perfect circle around the palm, leaving a clear, hand-shaped window of glass in the white. I kept writing. I wrote the words, "I am not going to look at the window," in my logbook, and then I wrote them again. A sustained note from a car horn cut through the intercom noise, clean and loud and single-toned, lasting exactly 60 seconds. The vibration was intense enough that the coffee in my mug formed concentric ripple rings and held them for the duration of the note. Then the horn stopped, and the intercom stopped in the same instant, and the silence was total. The phone rang. It was the desk phone, the hard line, used for supervisor communication. I picked it up. On the other end was a sound that took me a moment to identify. A wet, rhythmic thumping, deep and low, occurring at regular intervals. It took me 4 full seconds to understand that I was listening to my own heartbeat. It was amplified and played back to me with a half-second delay. Every time my heart contracted, the sound pulsed through the receiver. I could hear myself alive on the other end of a phone line I was holding. I hung up. I gathered my gear bag. I lifted my chair, unlatched the maintenance hatch that it conceals in the floor, a crawl space that connects to the highway department's drainage infrastructure, and I dropped in. I crawled for 2 miles through a 4-foot concrete drainage pipe, using my flashlight and my elbows. I came out at the relay station near the highway junction, where I sat in the parking lot until a due truck came past at 6 a.m. I did not go back for my final paycheck. When I cleared my personal locker at the main terminal a week later, I found 33 pennies arranged in a straight line on the shelf. All heads up. They were warm to the touch. I move every 6 months. I don't own a clock. If I find a penny on the ground, I walk in a different direction. Some losses are worth sustaining if the alternative is going back into that box. I grew up in a house where my mother worked nights and my father worked early mornings, which meant that I spent a lot of my childhood alone in the gray hours at either end of the day. I learned to find those hours agreeable. The quality of the light, the feeling of being one of very few people awake in the world at a given moment. By the time I took the overnight shift at the Coastal Highway booth, I was well practiced in the specific art of nighttime solitude. The booth sat at the base of a long causeway bridge, one of those flat, elevated spans that crosses a tidal estuary, with low concrete barriers on either side and nothing but dark water, and salt marsh grass below. On clear nights, the stars over the marsh were extraordinary. On foggy nights, which was most nights from October through March, you couldn't see the hood of your own car from the booth window. Out of my booth was a newer installation, climate controlled. Dual-pane laminated glass, a full camera suite, an intercom with tow-way communication, a panic button that connected to the highway patrol substation 8 miles north. I had used the panic button exactly once in 4 years, when a driver had a medical episode at the window. The response time was 11 minutes. I thought about that sometimes at 3 o'clock m. It was a Thursday in February when things changed. The thin fog that night was the worst I'd seen in 4 years on that road, thick enough to cut with something, pressing against the glass in a way that felt almost physical. Visibility from the booth window was maybe 15 feet. I could see the lane sensor, the collection tray, the beginning of the approach, and nothing beyond. Around 2:20 a.m. a car came through that I almost didn't register as unusual. White sedan, 4-door, moving at the correct approach speed, stopping cleanly at the window. The driver was a woman, perhaps 50, with dark hair and a pleasant, unremarkable face. She paid with exact change, counted it into my palm with the practiced ease of someone who had made this commute hundreds of times and drove on. Normal, completely normal, except that 4 minutes later, the same car came through again, that same white sedan. I was certain I have an eye for vehicles. It comes from the job. Same small dent in the front passenger door. Same crack in the right corner of the windshield. The woman at the wheel looked identical. Dark hair, pleasant face. She counted the exact change into my palm again. I almost said something. I told myself she'd turned around for some reason. It happens that she drove on. Her taillights disappeared into the fog. 11 minutes later, she was back. This time I leaned out and looked at her directly, and she smiled at me, not the horrifying smile from the other stories I've heard since, but a perfectly normal smile. The kind you give someone when you're a little embarrassed. "I keep missing my exit," she said. Her voice was warm and slightly apologetic. "I'll get it right this time." She counted the change into my palm a third time. I watched her taillights go. The exit she was supposedly looking for was the first. One past the causeway, you'd have to be asleep to miss it. I picked up the desk phone and called the Northern Substation non-emergency line, just to log it as a note. The officer on the desk said he'd ask the patrol car to keep an eye out. Routine. 40 minutes passed. Nothing unusual. I drank my coffee and read my book and watched the fog and mostly forgot about the woman in the white sedan. Then, at 3:17 a.m., a pair of headlights appeared at the extreme edge of my visibility, further back than the approach lane began, sitting. Still in the fog, not moving. Just lights, hanging in the woody gray murk like two yellow eyes. I watched them for a while. They didn't move. I picked up the intercom and said, "Can I help you?" into the external speaker. No response. The lights held position. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The lights did not move, did not dim, did not approach. I pressed the panic button, and then immediately second-guessed myself and felt embarrassed, but I left it active. 11 minutes, I thought. I'll wait. At the minute mark, the lights began to move. Not forward, toward the booth, but laterally drifting to the right off the road surface, toward the edge of the causeway. I watched them move, and I understood, with a lurch of vertigo, that if a car went over the edge of that barrier, it would fall 30 feet into tidal water in the dark and the fog, and I was the only person who would know it had happened. I grabbed my flashlight and my radio and went. Outside, the fog swallowed me immediately. I stayed along the right side barrier, one hand trailing on the concrete, and moved toward where I'd seen the lights. The water below was audible, that specific sound of tidal movement against concrete pilings, rhythmic and cold. My flashlight. Being dissolved in the fog at about 8 feet, I found the white sedan with my hand before I saw it with my eyes. It was stopped against the barrier, driver's side, engine running, headlights still on, and angled out over the water. The driver's door was open. The interior light was on. The car was empty. The engine ticked. The radio was playing quietly something instrumental, something I didn't recognize. Counted out on the driver's seat, in a perfectly straight line from left to right, were the coins she had used to pay the toll. 3 times over. 3 sets of exact change, arranged in sequence, all facing the same direction. I backed away from the car and got back on the radio and stayed on the line until the patrol car arrived 7 minutes later, which was faster than I expected. The officers found no sign of the driver anywhere on the causeway, no breach of the barriers, no evidence of anyone having gone into the water. K9 units tracked her scent to the driver's door and stopped there, as if she had simply stepped out of the air. The car was registered to a woman who had died 14 months earlier. A single vehicle accident on a coastal highway approximately 90 miles south. Her photograph in the DMV records matched the woman I had spoken to 3 times through my window. I don't know what to do with that information. I have sat with it for 2 years. I've talked to a therapist who is good at her job and who believes me when I tell her what happened. She has a framework for trauma and cognitive dissonance and the strange things the mind does under sustained isolation. It helps some of the time, but the coins are still in my memory, exactly as I found them. Lined up on the seat of a dead woman's car, on a bridge in the fog, above cold water, at 3 o'clock in the morning. 3 sets of exact change, paid. 3 times for a trip she had already finished. I transferred to a day shift at a different location. I try not to drive over water after dark. I tip heavily when I pay tolls, now some irrational compulsion, as though generosity might insulate me from whatever it is that circulates on those roads at those hours. The booth attendants on the night shift always wave when I go through. I wave back. I know what they're doing out there. I know what it costs.